I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. This is the first in a series of amazing collaborations between the Cruz Collection and Miami's Design District. I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Jeffrey Deitch tonight. This amazing event could have not have happened without the support of Rosa and Carlos de la Cruz and Craig Robbins. The partnership of Rosa, Carlos, and Craig has helped develop the Design District into this amazing area it is today. They've also been devoted to the education of our local artists and students for many years. I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome the ICA Miami to the neighborhood, which will open in December. I'm so happy to see so many familiar faces and friends tonight. Since we've opened in 5 years, I could have never imagined having everybody who's walked through the collection here in one night. Thank you very much. And now, as a courtesy to our speaker, Mr. Jeffrey Deitch, I will ask that everyone turn off their cell phone, please. And also, as you can see, we have a full house tonight. Try not to move around the museum once we turn off the lights, and if you do so, please be very careful. So without further delay, to introduce Mr. Deitch, Craig Robbins.
So it was 31 years ago that I was in college. I finished a year at the University of Barcelona, and I had become interested in art. My father was all excited. He didn't really know a lot about the formal art world, but his business partner had these very good friends, and they were already important art collectors. I mean, really important art collectors. And so they had this brilliant art consultant. Their names are Norman and Irma Bremen. And they were working with this very young guy who was a lot older than I was then, a guy named Jeffrey Deitch, who was then, I think, a consultant at Citibank. Do I have that right? And so Jeffrey probably does not remember this. I wouldn't if I were him. He remembers. But they introduced me to Jeffrey, and I got to, for the first time, to talk to somebody who is extremely knowledgeable and serious about art. And truly that was part of my own inspiration. Since then, I think for all of us, it's been quite an odyssey. Jeffrey has done so many remarkable things. And what's interesting about Jeffrey is everything that he does is so remarkable. He just engages in culture and does it in so many ways and with incredible openness. I think when I think about all of the experimental things and the very obvious serious things, the range of engagements that Jeffrey has in the art world, he's certainly one of the most inspiring people. Of course, also, in my experience, and that initial experience led me to do many things, to collect, but one of the things that has always been nicest for me and that I've been most proud of is the years of collaborations with Carlos and Rosa de la Cruz. If 15 years ago I would have told all of you that we'd be sitting together on 41st Street in the Miami Design District, you would have thought I was on drugs. It would have been an impossible vision, but while a lot is recognized about the commercial side of what happens in the Design District, for me the cultural side has always been even more important, and the anchor of that cultural effort has been the De La Cruz family, and really, not that I would ever take anything away from Carlos, but it's been Rosa there every day, pounding away. So it's really special that 30 years later, we're all here together, the Brahmans, the Dela Cruzes, and welcoming Jeffrey once again back to Miami.
Thank you so much, Craig, for that wonderful introduction. And there's something I might add that I do remember that maybe you don't remember. So, as part of our dialogue, I arranged for subscriptions to Sotheby's and Christie's auction catalogs to go to Craig's dormitory room in college. So I think you were probably the youngest subscriber ever in the history of Sotheby's and Christie's auction catalogs. So your engagement in art started very, very early. So this is wonderful to be here in Miami with so many friends, and it is such an honor to be here, to have been invited by Rosa and Carlos. So Rosa and Carlos have inspired me so much over the past 20 years. I'm such an admirer of their brilliant artistic vision and their great contributions to the community and their remarkable generosity of spirit. So it's a great, great honor for me to be here. Thank you so much. And it's also wonderful to be here at this historic time, as in addition to this fantastic program at the De La Cruz Collection, the fact that the new ICA is going to be the neighbor, this is just momentous. It's one of the most important things going on in the whole world of art. I also want to add that some of my best experiences in art are my collaborations with Craig. Very early on in the history of the Design District, Craig asked, well, would you like to use any spaces? And we did some fantastic projects of the Kehinde Wiley show in particular. It was really momentous and was always very exciting. And it's just also so great to be here with Irma Norman Brayman, who've been friends. We've been worked together since 1982. And it's been an amazing relationship. And also Don and Mara Rubel, who have been part of my history and art since the 70s. So it's wonderful to be here in this friendly atmosphere with people who I've known for a long time. So my talk is actually going to be fairly rarefied. I'm going to address a somewhat difficult topic of contemporary abstract painting. And I'm inspired to do that because Rosa and Carlos have built the most important collection anywhere of new abstract painting. It's an interest that we share, and something that it's difficult to experience, and I thought would take the challenge of trying to talk about this. One of the most rewarding experiences I had during my tenure at the Museum of Contemporary Art was when, during the exhibition The Painting Factory, Rose and Carlos made a special one-day trip to the museum to see the show. And it was very exciting that they acquired probably the greatest painting that was in the show, commissioned by Wade Guyton, and here it is in this room behind us, looking so majestic. So this talk is really presented in recognition of that wonderful trip and that special acquisition. So painting is something extraordinary. Even though there are all these other interesting things going on in art with immersive media, walk-in sculpture, a fusion today of art and theater, there's nothing like painting. And I marvel at the way that an artist can, in a rectangle, infuse their entire life experience, their identity, their years of study of art history, their connection with the present, their vision into the future. It's all there in that rectangle. And there's nothing like looking at a superb painting and getting all of that, getting an artist's contribution distilled into 30 seconds. That's a charge that for me is the greatest thing in art. What I'm going to do in this talk is use the exhibition at the Museum of Contemporary Art, the Painting Factory, as a framework to discuss this challenging topic. And what I thought I would do is, because some of you probably were interested in all the other topics that are relevant in art today, we might open it up for a little discussion afterwards on some other issues. Painting is dead was the prevailing sentiment among the young artists who I encountered when I first connected with contemporary art in the early 1970s. The war in Vietnam was still raging, and the art world was engaged by the counterculture and social liberation. Artists questioned how painting could effectively address these urgent social and political issues, and how could a traditional medium like painting compete with the new media. After several decades of radical artistic innovations, it is fascinating to see that abstract painting has now been transformed into the most dynamic directions in contemporary art. A painting tradition that was once seen as essentially reductive has now become expansive, bringing social commentary, technological innovation, and a dialogue with popular culture into its platform. The practice of abstract painting has opened up to encompass, in addition to its own history, the other great artistic innovations of the past century, including conceptualism, appropriation, and performance. Rather than reducing itself to a narrow definition of the medium, abstract painting has emerged as an arena where opposing concepts can invigorate each other. Doctrinaire purity of form, as espoused by the great critic Clement Greenberg, has been replaced by a new hybrid model. Ironically, one of the places where this fresh approach to abstraction was germinating was the studio that might seem the farthest from the practice of the abstract tradition, Andy Warhol's factory. The factory, as you know, was a haven for all sorts of brilliant artistic misfits, but it was also a laboratory where the historical and contemporary innovations in art and culture could be remixed and reconstituted. Especially after Warhol refocused on painting in the 70s and 80s, with series like The Shadows, The Oxidations, and The Rorschachs. The Rorschachs are my favorite. He transformed pure abstraction into an impure product that opened up new directions. He thrived on the increasing confusion between high art and progressive popular culture, and the challenge to conventional methods of painting by the techniques of mechanical reproduction. These confrontations simultaneously undermined and expanded accepted approaches to painting. Now, these are brilliant works you probably know: Camouflage, Shadows, leading into ChristopherWool. We'll get to that. Warhol was able to create paintings that were both mediated and direct. His photo silk screens of found imagery reflected the way that the world was increasingly perceived through television, photography, and other indirect mediated experience. At the same time, his paintings recorded the immediacy of their creation, with their send-up of Pollock's drips through his friend's urination on the oxidation paintings, or the ink blots and misregistrations that show the vigorous handwork involved in his silkscreen technique. This talk follows a chain of influence from Andy Warhol as an abstract painter to ChristopherWool, Rudolf Stingel, and then a younger generation who emerged from the mid-1990s to the present decade. Many of these artists draw on Warhol's use of mechanical techniques and his embrace of chance imperfections resulting from a deliberately imprecise use of silkscreen painting. Following Warhol's approach to abstraction, elements from popular culture are often embedded into the work. This new generation of abstract artists is revitalizing the abstract tradition of the New York School by incorporating the intervening history of pop, minimal, and process art. The new abstract painting is also enriched with an engagement with other artistic media. ChristopherWool's work, seen here, references punk rock in addition to Jackson Pollock and Andy Warhol. It reflects his admiration for punk's directness and its ability to create compelling music with limited means. His paintings also embrace William Burroughs' cut-up aesthetic that was central to New York punk and no-wave music. The effort to reconcile contradictory aesthetic directions is central to the work that most of the artists in the exhibition. This challenge has been crucial in the progression of modern and contemporary art. Frank Stella, for example, seen here, was seen to have reconciled Jackson Pollock's organic all-over composition and his drips of black house paint with the stripes and interior logic of Jasper Johns' flags. Stella's resulting black paintings helped change the direction of painting and sculpture from gestural abstraction to minimalism. And I love the sequence here with Pollock's revolutionary approach to painting, Andy Warhol silk screening, that's Andy and Gerard Malanga. And then we get to ChristopherWool. Now, Christopher engages in a three-way reconciliation between Pollock, Johns, and Warhol, fusing their seemingly incompatible innovations. And Wool also reconciles the refinement of Pollock with the graffiti tags that he sees every day in his Chinatown and Lower East Side neighborhoods. I think people ask, why is it that ChristopherWool is so admired today? And I would answer that this is an amazing achievement as his career has built, that he has reconciled what I see as the two great strains in American painting. Pollock and his freedom working flat on the ground, connection with performance, and then Warhol and Warhol's use of the silkscreen printing technique. So it's a pretty amazing achievement to reconcile these two strains with some Jasper Johns and work of other great artists thrown in as well. This is one of the recent series of ChristopherWool, and you see here, this is a very good example of this reconciliation of the Warhol silkscreen strain and the Pollock poured painting strain. And I love this close connection between ChristopherWool and Andy Warhol with the Rorschachs. So, during this time, Andy had a very strange relationship with the art establishment. The younger artists loved the work, but he wasn't really accepted by the established art world. And he was doing these brilliant works in the mid-'80s, like the Rorschachs, just for himself. And these were, in fact, never exhibited in a major show in his lifetime. But the artists who saw them just loved them. And they've always been a great inspiration for me. I'll just add a little aside about creative misunderstanding. So Andy misunderstood how the Rorschach blots were made. So he thought that you just dripped some ink on a piece of paper and folded it, and then you got your Rorschach blot, and then you interpreted it. He didn't know that there were actually a whole set of already pre-made Rorschach blots that psychiatrists knew how to interpret. One of my biggest regret in art was before Andy died, he knew that I loved these Rorschach paintings so much, and he had a project for me. He wanted me to go around New York City on the streets with images of his Rorschachs and then get people to interpret them. And what we would do is we would do a book with images of the paintings and then people's interpretations. Something I still want to do. The other artist, in addition to ChristopherWool, of a bit of an older generation who really caught on to Warhol's innovation with the silkscreen, with this factory technique, found a new way to make an abstract painting, was Rudolf Stingel. And I met him when he first came to New York from Italy in the mid-1980s. Stingel articulated a new vision, a new artistic vision with his instructions pamphlet of 1989. Some of you may know this. This is absolutely a brilliant recipe for how to make a painting. So it's a manual that he printed on how to make an abstract painting. And following his step-by-step outline, his do-it-yourself painting factory produced a confounding body of work which undermined the mystique of artistic inspiration, which over time became increasingly compelling and influential. Those who think that of contemporary artists, it's, people are these flash in the pan rising stars. Both Rudolf Stingel and ChristopherWool, it took almost 30 years for their work to build the kind of audience and influence that it had. It was step by step. Stingel also transformed the definition of painting with an audacious use of the ready-made, installing wall-to-wall carpeting. Here it is, on the gallery wall as a painting. And visitors, of course, could not resist touching the carpet's weave, creating hundreds of random patterns on the surface. Without theatricality, Stingel had created a participatory, performative painting. And I don't know how well you can see it here. You see that the floor is light. It is a Stingel carpet. This is the show at MoCA. And first we wanted to install the carpet on the wall, but Stingel had a better idea. He said, why not carpet the entire space? So it started pristine white, and I would say he was very meticulous. We had to send the exact carpet color and weave back to his studio for him to approve. It had to be the exact color, the exact weave, and we had the carpet specially made. And so the entire museum was covered with this, the whole wing of the museum. And slowly, over the course of the 4-month show, was the footsteps, other things, the remnants of the visitors created these patterns. It was absolutely fascinating. Glenn Ligon is the other artist of a slightly older generation who moves on from Warhol's silkscreen techniques. Glenn sets up a dialogue between painting and literature, abstracting text by James Baldwin and other writers. The literary references that were dismissed by Clement Greenberg in his school as undermining the integrity of abstract painting are central to the form and content of Ligon's work. Also, a lot of reference to Jasper Johns. And like most of the other artists who were showing, you can see the real thing here, much better than the slides. And here is Ligon's studio. Paintings stacked a little bit like Warhol might stack them. You see the opaque projector. Mark Bradford makes extraordinary paintings without painting. The physical presence of the work references Pollock, Johns, and Warhol, but the works are not painted in the conventional sense. They are built up with layers of paper and then incised and sanded down. Embedded in the layers of paper are sections of billboards and advertising posters that had been directed to the residents of his South Central Los Angeles neighborhood. The work makes both a compelling social statement and a stirring formal response to the history of abstract painting. Bradford has found a contemporary solution to one of the most challenging problems in painting: how to express a social message in abstract form. Here are some images of Mark's studio, and it really is amazing. They read totally as paintings, but there's no painting in these paintings. So you see the scraps of advertising posters, things that he finds in the neighborhood, and pastes on. You see the glue, and this is how Mark works. He has these powerful industrial sanders, and here he is with a broom sweeping the results of the sanding. Julie Meritou brings military mapping, architectural drawing, and urban planning into the composition of her paintings. Her great Black City paintings encompass both the history of modern painting and the history of the modern city. The first layer is architectural. The second is hard-edged painting, created with a mechanical process. And only the final top layer is hand-drawn in a conventional painting technique. And this is Julie's studio in Berlin, and shows the process of making the great mural painting that you can now see at the Goldman Sachs headquarters at 200 West Street in New York, opposite the World Trade Center. It was absolutely an amazing process. This was one of my projects. This was my most rewarding public art commission. Abstraction and reality blend in Urs Fischer's dust paintings. His dust paintings build on concept, imagery, and techniques of a succession of radical artistic innovations, from Man Ray and Marcel Duchamp's dust-breeding photographs, some of you may know that great image, to Warhol's silk-screened abstractions, to the dust in Bruce Naumann's Mapping the Studio video. The structure of the work also references the metal surfaces of ChristopherWool's paintings that Urs admires tremendously. The work fuses a strain of radical art history into a contemporary abstract vision. Andy Warhol's factory actually farmed out the production of his photo silkscreens, but Urs Fischer's studio is an amazing place. Urs's studio was equipped with machines to not only make the silk screens, but to wash them as well. I've never seen, he has a walk-in silk screen washing room. So Urs embraces whatever technologies he needs to realize his ambitious vision. Sterling Ruby, and you can see great paintings of his here at the entrance, Sterling Ruby makes industrial strength paintings, bringing to the medium the super-scaled ambition that Richard Serra brings to his sculpture. Ruby works in a factory-like studio in an industrial area of Los Angeles. The subtle refinement of Mark Rothko is crossed with the anarchic gestures of spray can graffiti. The floor of his studio, making some of his collages. Josh Smith, also well represented here in the collection, emphasizes his use of traditional painting techniques, even using small canvases as palettes. His approach is anything but traditional, however. He creates multiple versions of a limited number of motifs and sizes with his intensive energy. Massimiliano Gioni describes Smith as a factory of one. He does by hand, with endless variations, what Warhol would have done with a mechanical process. Josh Smith shows that the painting factory is more a state of mind than a physical reality. Kelly Walker's bricks read as both abstract pattern and an impenetrable wall. Walker's brick paintings propose another way to reconcile the opposing aesthetics of Pollock, Johns, and Warhol. They reference Pollock's non-hierarchical composition, Johns' engagement with the found abstraction, his flagstone pattern, for instance, and Warhol's abstraction of iconic images rendered with a mechanical printing technique. These works, referencing Warhol's disaster paintings, the race riot paintings, are very, very moving. You see that the reference to Warhol's on the bottom layer and the top layer are these splashes of chocolate that have a strong dialogue with what ChristopherWool is doing, but will open up to a lot of other different things as well. Viennese action painting, for instance. Here's Kelly Walker's fascinating studio. It really is a painting factory. Seth Price is the theorist of the current movement, and his essay, Dispersion, has become the key text referenced by not only this many artists in this group, but by a younger group of what some people describe as the post-internet artists. Seth's work fuses digital information with plastic manufacturing techniques. His mental images are packaged in vacuum-formed, high-impact polystyrene. And for the catalog that we did, rather than studio images, Seth showed us images of the factories that can create the vacuum-formed plastic. This is his work being made. This is virtually a painting factory. And here's an image that doesn't compare to the majesty of the work itself behind us. Guyton uses the laser printer as his painting factory. The artist's gesture is mediated through the digital file and the printing machine. Even though it is a machine rather than the artist's hand that makes the marks, the paintings present a strong gestural quality, which I think is absolutely amazing. You really feel the artist's body and his hand in these works through the mediation. They are a digital response to the black brushstrokes of Franz Klein, the black paintings of Frank Stella, and the black paint stick drawings of Richard Serra. And very interesting images of Wade's studio. That's this painting being made. The challenge to reconcile the oldest aesthetic opposition in modern and contemporary art, representation and abstraction, also engages many of the artists in the painting factory. Tauba Auerbach's fold paintings, for example, are simultaneously and seamlessly both representational and abstract. Mathematics and linguistics also inform her work, which is infused with conceptual rigor and philosophical challenges. She has been able to update the type of conceptual structures in the work of an earlier generation of artists like Saul LeWitt to the digital age. Her work has the precision of machine fabrication, but is laboriously made by hand with the aid of industrial equipment like paint sprayers. Tauba took these photos herself of the floor of her studio while she was making the fold paintings. Her work extends the tradition of modern abstract painting into a contemporary context, both conceptually and formally. think this is the floor is an artwork itself. Kirsten Brach and Adela Roeder characterized their project Das Institute as an import-export agency, using advertising strategies to manipulate and exchange information. They describe their work as set in a context of reproduction, advertisement, and branding. The commercial arm of Das Institute develops products such as silkscreen fabrics, posters, napkins, and stickers. The concept of painting is extended into its production, reproduction, and sale. They are following Andy Warhol's example or inspiration of being business artists, but of course in a kind of interesting, ironic way. Pictures of Nothing, Abstract Art Since Pollock, was the title of Kirk Varnadoe's brilliant Mellon Lectures at the National Gallery in 2003. The title was ironic, derived from the comment of a dyspeptic viewer recorded in an essay by William Hazlitt on the work of his contemporary, J.M.W. Turner. One of Varnadoe's goals in his 6 lectures was to show how abstract art after Pollock was in fact infused with meaning. Much of the meaning of the work was about its own history and materiality. It reflected the social context of its time, but that was less important to Varnadoe than the work's engagement with formal and perceptual issues. Painters of Modern Life, derived from the title of Charles Baudelaire's 1859 essay on Constantin Guise, might be a better description of the younger group of abstract painters who are the subject of this talk. No longer paintings of nothing, even in an ironic sense, the work of these artists address today's social and cultural issues in addition to their dialogue with the dynamic history of abstraction. Abstract painting, which for a time was almost left for dead, has reemerged as one of the art forms most engaged with contemporary life.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, yeah. What I suggest is that some people will want to leave, and but if some people want to stay, we can open up the discussion and talk about some new issues, a little bit about what's going on in art today, and maybe Rosa might want to ask.
Before that, I mean, I'm not going to ask questions. I'm going to let some people ask questions because you and I, we've talked a lot together, Carlos. I think that this is incredible that we're having this rebirth of art here in Miami because, I mean, this hadn't happened in a long time. When Craig and I opened the Moore Space, everybody thought we were crazy. Everybody, when I called Dominic Malone to do the curatorial, they thought, oh my God, this woman's crazy, she's throwing money. And they came in and said, there's all this junk in here. And what I like about you, and I've always respected you and looked up at you, is that you are a risk taker. And I'm a risk taker too. And you know what? I'm a risk taker because I've seen people like you. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be a risk taker. And we want to welcome, I think everybody here should welcome Jeffrey here to Miami. I mean, this is unbelievable that we have Jeffrey Deitch here tonight. I mean, when I asked him if he could come, I was sure he was going to say no. I mean, I was just sure. And I think... And that, who knows that better than anybody? Craig and my husband, Carlos. And Craig, even though Craig and I have been partners for many, many years at the Moore Space, and we never had any fights. Unbelievable. With my character, with my nice character, we never had any fights. And Craig and I were for 9 years working together. But thank you. I remember when you came and you bought all of the pinwheels. I mean, and you really loved that we were doing things that nobody else was doing. But I mean, you have been the pioneer. I mean, the same way Duchamp was the pioneer. I mean, and you see artists like Jackson Pollock, that those paintings, and you see some people that go into history, and you will be in history. I mean, some people will just be here now. They're egomaniacs, but you're not an egomaniac. I love you. I love what you're doing, and thank you for coming. The De La Cruz Collection, please.
So is this really the death of painting? Does this movement really mark the death of painting?
No, I think that what's so fascinating is that painting, it was widely assumed, really, that painting was dead. I went through, as you did, a decade or more in the art world where that was the assumption: painting's dead, don't even bother. And abstract painting in particular. And when there was a revival of painting in the early 80s with Basquiat, Haring, was far from abstraction. So what I find just fascinating is here, and you can see it all laid out in front of you in the De La Cruz collection, that this is some of the strongest painting being done in decades. And it's the hardest thing to do in art. And these artists are doing it very well. So it's not the death of painting at all. This is an amazing rebirth of painting. But it's all cyclical. And there are now many, many artists who've jumped on the bandwagon of the new conceptual abstraction or the mechanically made abstraction. But I think now we're seeing a lot of the second and third string that are copying. And these artists who we talked about are very vital and continue to do great work, but we're probably going to see things moving into a different direction. This will be a chapter that will close, and we have to look forward to something new.
As you state, Jeffrey, art is so cyclical. Where do you see abstract art reaching its culmination, and what will come after it?
Painting is a continuum. And one of the wonderful things is that it's a dialogue with all the great art of the past. But it's not enough just to distill the art of the past. You have to have some inspiration which gives you a leap. And you look at Wool and Stingel, and they haven't just slavishly copied. There's something very fresh that they've come up with. So I think that this movement needs to be absorbed, and probably the next big thing in painting will be representational. And then another generation will come back with another leap with an innovation and abstraction.
Jeffrey, I've known you a long time, not as long as some of these people here. And I can remember our conversations of like Morris Lewis all the way to graffiti artist. And there's one thing I don't know if you don't mention or I'm putting it into your mouth, but you also have a great eye, and there's connoisseurship. Would you agree?
Well, one of the great things about being involved with art is many fields, like it's really a young person's game, that you lose it when you get into middle age. One of the remarkable things about art is if you stay focused, you get better and better and better. And because each work you look at educates you a little more, and you begin to make all the connections. So somebody who is 62 years old, as I am, consider myself much sharper in understanding new art than I was when I was 22. And I don't hang out in the clubs all night anymore, maybe once a year, but and so I need friends to direct me to what's fresh. But I think I was talking with Don and Mara last night, and it's a really rewarding thing that the connoisseurship is something that increases by your looking. And I just encourage everybody to just engage in the pleasure of looking at works of art and making all the connections. And it's just so rewarding to put it all together. And there's also something interesting you mentioned about connoisseurship. So, if you study art history today, you're learning a lot about theory, Marxism, but connoisseurship is not taught so much anymore in the universities. So connoisseurship is something you have to learn on your own, but it's all open and it's all there for you to put together.
Among the first artists you introduced, most particularly Warhol, but also other artists like Rauschenberg, who brought social commentary, social imagery into the realm of working in abstract ways. Is there an element of that you find among the artists of the subsequent generations that you've spoken about?
Yes, Rauschenberg is also an essential precedent. And there is one great work he did that also leads into this whole use of printing. It's the tire track print they did in the 1950s. And Rauschenberg is so essential in the fusion of conceptual, performative use of popular culture imagery. He's one of the most essential influences. And you could do the same sort of talk instead of referencing Andy Warhol, Bob Rauschenberg. It's just this particular talk it's more about the connection with the silkscreen. There's a debate, in fact, who used the silkscreen first. And some people will say that it's Bob Rauschenberg who introduced the silkscreen to painting, and Andy saw him doing it. So that's something to be debated by the art historians and to sort that out. But Rauschenberg is one of the greatest inspirations for sure.
Whether the element of social commentary of the popular culture, the social commentary that's part of graffiti, which you've also referenced, is a strong thread among the new abstract painters.
Yes, it is. And what I find it fascinating how it is abstracted. So Mark Bradford, for instance, you don't see some political slogan in the paintings. But I think the work has a profound social message. A lot of it is made from billboards that are an advertising that you see in his neighborhood around Leimert Park in LA, the African American neighborhood. And it's deeply inside the work. It is more abstracted, but I think that you get the social message in in a different way, in a more abstracted way. And I think it's one of his greatest achievements to be both socially, to have both the social statement and the philosophical abstract statement. And you see it in, here in Rashid Johnson's work right here, another art with a different kind of technique, similar thing, that there's a social message in this abstract work, which I think is a phenomenal achievement.
Sorry, you said that at one point you were saying that this was the beginning of social commentary and abstract art. I immediately thought of flags. Flags have always, I mean, there's locks of color representing, liberty, equality, fraternity, or whatever.
So of course, the flag is one of the
it's not painting,
most important abstract image referenced by, of course, Jasper Johns, also Andy Warhol. In the famous Race Riot painting that used to belong to Robert Mapplethorpe, it's red, white, and blue. And in Stella, in the stripes.
Literally.
So, yeah, so that the American flag is the central abstract image of our nation, and artists have been deeply influenced by the power of that image. That's a good example of how you can fuse a powerful abstract form with a deep social message. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeffrey.